So what is a microclimate and how does it affect your garden? Well, a microclimate is a small area which is different in climate from the surrounding area. So, for example, if you had a very shady garden but it has a little sunny spot that's particularly warm and sheltered, then that would be a little microclimate. One microclimate that many houses have is that the actual walls of the house, if they're made of brick, they absorb the sun during the day and then they give it off at night, which means that it can actually be a few degrees warmer in winter absolutely beside your house. And you may be able to grow more tender plants literally beside the house in pots or in a border right beside the house that you couldn't grow even a few feet away. So I've been to talk to Paul Seaborne of Pelham Plants. He and his partner have created a garden from a rough donkey field with all sorts of problems like being too windy. And they've created garden microclimates mainly through using hedges. So Paul, tell me what the garden was like when you first came here and what your sort of vision for it was.
Well, this was a blank paddock. The elderly lady who lived here before us kept donkeys and horses, and it was where the animals lived. So it was very uneven and rough and very little opportunity for lawns or anything like that when we started. And really we started on a very small scale and started to create borders. And the vision was to have fun with plants, but there was no full design in my mind. That very much evolved, and it's evolved really into a number of sections that you see today, creating different environments for different types of plants.
And also you were telling me that you had grown hedges, partly to create garden rooms, but mainly to protect from the wind. So can you tell me what you chose for hedges and how you did that?
Yeah, well, this is a woodland edge garden, and we're in the Sussex Weald, which is a fairly level area between the North and South Downs in southern England, and this garden has no views, but it has wind. So all of those people who might have coastal views and not want to hide them away behind hedges and want to enjoy those and therefore have to live with the wind, I didn't want the wind. We're surrounded by agricultural land, open farmland from here to the sea, and the wind, when it picks up, can really whistle through and almost get caught in the woodland that surrounds us on two sides. So we learned very early on to try and filter that wind in some way. We were going to have to plant hedges. And on a heavy clay soil and a limited budget, and with a haste to create a garden, we went for very quick growing hedges. And I'm surrounded here at the moment with hornbeam hedges, which grow very quick. They argue when you plant them, and I'm always planting hedges as very tiny little whips, they sleep for 1 year, creep for the next, and then leap in the third. And ever since, we've been cutting them 3 times a year. They're ready for their second cut already. But they're fantastic at filtering the wind. And what evolved as a result of that is garden rooms, essentially. As you go through the garden, there's a series of hedges which filters the wind. And it creates little sections, maybe a shady corner, maybe a hot corner, maybe a corner with high hedges that filters the wind more than perhaps other corners, and you're able to grow exotics or large leaf perennials. And that wasn't really necessarily in the initial vision, but it's worked out very well, and the garden has a coherence as a result, I think, even though it might on paper or perhaps from overhead appear almost disjointed, but it does seem to flow in my mind.
You said you started the nursery from the plants that were in the garden, and this is still your propagating bed, really, isn't it?
I mean, the entire purpose of the garden is to feed the nursery. It's a giant stock bed. If, whilst we're gardening in here, we learn more about the plants and how they grow, then that's all to the good. That helps us explain their behaviour to customers. What's thirstier than another plant? What tolerates more shade than another? But it is set up to be a stock bed. And that really informed the garden rooms, really, because I didn't have enough at first sheltered corners to grow large leaf shade-loving plants. I've got shade from the neighbour's wood, but the wind would cut through them. So by growing the hedges and creating little niches, we've been able to create these environs in which stock plants can thrive to supply us with seed or cuttings or divisions to feed the nursery. it's finding the little niche that suits them. So I think one of the best examples, I've got a giant heuchera in the garden, Heuchera villosa autumn bride. It can flower above a metre high with large panicles of creamy white flowers. And the very first year we planted it, it was getting a lot of wind damage and it was getting a lot of leaf scorch. But over the years we found that establishing shrubs and trees and hedges have helped filter the wind and the sun. And now we get these lovely limey leaves without any kind of tearing or burning in the sun. And those we nestle in behind hedges. And they're actually ideal for the situation because they're incredibly dry tolerant as well. Once established, they can cope with the root competition that our hedges provide. And maybe another example, a widely grown plant, Stipa gigantea, flowers in this garden 2 metres tall. The very first year that we planted it, summer storms came through and actually lifted the plant out of the ground. It just rocked with the wind. But now, of course, we're filtering that a lot more. So we get the sounds of the wind and we get the movement, but we don't get the damage anywhere near as much as we used to.
And what's your advice for people who are worried about shade, in terms they sort of say, well, I don't want a hedge because I don't want it too shady, or I don't want the shade of the trees. I mean, how have you worked shade and sun so that because you've got some wonderful, brilliant sunny beds and you've also got some lovely shady areas. So how have you worked that?
I think one of the key skills in gardening is to be observant in how plants behave and to get a feel for different corners of the garden. And you very quickly notice that actually what you thought might have been a tender plant has survived much better in one area than another. Or you might notice that there's better flowering in one area than another, and then you exploit the benefits of that area. So we're sat very close to an area that's got a lot of hot planting in it, and that really gets the sun for the majority of the day. As soon as the sun gets above the tree line behind us, and that's in full sun all day. And I think to then maximise the benefit of that sun by choosing your plants carefully for that area and not trying to go against the right plant, right place ethos. There's no way that I would be able to grow ferns in that area and for them to be as luxurious as they are in maybe a shady corner. So I think see what might be a difficult area or huge contrasts in a garden as something that you can turn to your advantage and not try and go against the environment that you've created. Enjoy the moisture or the humidity or the shelter that you've generated by creating those sections, those garden rooms. And I think at first glance a hedge might not be seen as anything other than a structural element to a garden, but it actually helps create a feel in the garden. It also helps to create the environment that benefits the plants as well.
And of course the other thing is that people quite often want to turn as much of their garden into a sunny area as possible.
Yeah.
And that presumably is a bit of a mistake, because it's much better to just say, well, that's going to be partial shade, what can I grow there?
A partial shade is one of the most difficult things to advise customers on. I'm often being asked about partial shade, and we have a discussion about what to them do they think is partial shade. It's very easy to use the term dappled shade, but not all of us are having shade created by a light tree canopy. And I like to think of partial shade as an area where the plants can see the sky, but they're not scorched out by the heat of the afternoon sun or the midday sun. So we've got a lot of plants in partial shade here that enjoy the brightness of the situation, but benefit from it not being too hot in the middle of the summer, the highest heat. So we grow a lot of on our heavy clay soils, we grow a lot of daylilies, astrantias, geraniums, we've got the heucheras, we've got grasses like the Japanese Hakonikloa grass, the woodland grass, and they love partial shade. They respond to the light, they grow better in a bright shade, but they're not damaged by midsummer hot sun scorching out the tips of their leaves.
Certainly in my garden at the moment, because we're now talking high summer, your garden looks much greener and more verdant than mine does. We live about an hour and a half away from each other, so it's not as if it's a completely different weather, but I think you've just got more shelter in this garden than I have.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you you perhaps might not have noticed is that there's a gentle tilt to the garden, that it tilts slightly facing north, and that means we're slightly cooler here. Just a slight tilt in the opposite direction, you'd gain more sun, and that can cause me problems. In winter, it can lie very cold throughout the entire garden. A frost could stay on the ground for day after day because the sun isn't high enough and the ground is tipping in the wrong direction. But I think in the summer months, to be in mid-summer here and have green grass, plants looking relatively fresh still, I think is a testament to how cool the garden can be. That the sun doesn't get up above the woodland in this area before 10 or 11 in the morning, but it's bright enough that the plants can thrive. And whilst often I'm envious of a view, a southerly view, maybe of the South Downs or the sea beyond, I know from experience that that can be a lot hotter and can dry out a lot quicker. And the other thing perhaps to mention here is that we're on a heavy clay soil as well, and over the years we've worked it, we've added in huge quantities of organic matter, and that can retain moisture and allow plants to be a lot fresher than they might otherwise be. And 100 or so miles away in, let's say, East Anglia, it's much freer draining soils, much more sky to be had. We are surrounded by woodland. It's not the big skies of East Anglia. And I think that does a lot of the plants a favour. It can delay their flowering. Summer really doesn't start here until July, but it can absolutely keep them fresher for longer, I think.
Another way you can create a garden microclimate is by using walls or even little buildings, garden sheds, or even perhaps a folly. And there's a video coming up now about how garden ruins and follies have created wonderful pieces of microclimate at Great Compt Garden. So don't miss that, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.